What if I told you that a single word, just one, had the strength to shake the confidence of the most dominant nation on earth? Not a weapon, not a declaration of war, but a word. A word that didn't come from a commander or a president, but from a diplomat, steady, composed, and fearless. It wasn't shouted on battlefields, but spoken softly in the corridors of diplomacy, yet it landed harder than any missile could. Today, you're about to see the exact moment when the global script began to rewrite itself. You'll hear the story of how Jaishankar, India's voice to the world, used intellect over aggression to challenge decades of control. How that one word he selected didn't just spark a discussion, but shook the very pillars of Western dominance. Stay with me, because by the end of this speech, you won't just know the word, you'll feel its weight. You'll see how one phrase can change the balance of power. And perhaps you may never look at international politics the same way again. Because the strength of diplomacy lies not only in what is spoken, but in when and how it is spoken. In global affairs, words are far more than sentences. They are strategies, weapons, and symbols. When a figure like Jaishankar speaks, he's not just addressing leaders in a room. He's speaking to history, to perception, to the invisible forces that structure power. Every phrase is deliberate, weighed, and sharpened to carry meaning beyond its surface. The diplomatic stage is not casual dialogue. It's a battlefield of ideas. And on that battlefield, language is one of the sharpest blades. A single word, when perfectly placed, can rearrange alliances, unmask hypocrisy, and shake long-established narratives. Jaishankar, with his deep understanding of India's place in a transforming world, knows this better than most. His choice of words is never random. It's surgical. What he says matters, but what he implies matters even more. Silence has long been considered a safe strategy in diplomacy. Nations often prefer quiet restraint over bold declarations, especially when treading sensitive waters. For decades, India played this role well, measured, careful, always mindful not to disrupt the balance of global powers. But silence held too long begins to sound like surrender. That's the point where Jaishankar chose to break away. His decision to end that strategic silence was not a moment of noise, but a calculated strike of purpose. And when he spoke, he didn't need flowery speeches or endless arguments. He needed only one word, delivered at the right time, to unsettle the most powerful capitals of the world. With that word, he dismantled an entire assumption. When Jaishankar used the word decolonize, it was no casual remark. It was deliberate, sharpened, and aimed. That single word carried centuries of memory, echoing through seats of power, not only in Washington but across the West. It wasn't a phrase, it was a verdict. It declared the end of intellectual submission and political obedience. It tore through frameworks that had been accepted without question for generations. In that moment, Jaishankar wasn't just voicing India's position. He was channeling the frustration of nations across the global South, long silenced, long patronized. The United States has often positioned itself as the world's judge on democracy, human rights, and order. But the word decolonize shattered that illusion. It reminded the West that the world was no longer content to be lectured, labeled, or spoken for. For decades, America has dominated the narrative, dictating economics, politics, even morality. But one word cut through that dominance like lightning. It didn't just challenge U.S. policymakers. It questioned the very lens through which the West views its relationship with the rest of the globe. It exposed an uncomfortable truth, that the old balance of power is crumbling, and the future will not be written by one voice alone. Jaishankar's move wasn't angry or reckless. It was precise. It avoided provocation, but it also avoided seeking validation. That made it powerful. It broke away from the usual diplomatic dance of careful half-sentences and cautious smiles. Instead, it was firm, unapologetic, sovereign, and the impact was immediate. Think tanks, journalists, and commentators across the West paid attention. They saw not just India asserting itself, but a global trend of nations rising, claiming independence from the old order. The mirror had turned. For once, it was not America defining the world. It was India showing the world its reflection. For years, India's foreign policy has been a tightrope act, balancing national identity, with the need for global approval. But Jaishankar's choice of one word marked a transformation. It wasn't just a diplomatic remark, it was a cultural awakening. It signaled the end of compromise on values, history, and self-respect. It was India standing upright, not as a follower of borrowed narratives, but as an author of its own. This wasn't isolation nor defiance. It was dignity. It was the demand for respect on equal terms. The declaration made it clear India would no longer be judged by colonial shadows or Western expectations. The global order itself has shifted. For much of the last century, the world revolved around one axis, the United States. It set the economic rules, the military alliances, even the language of right and wrong. But now, with nations like India rising in confidence and independence, that map is redrawn. Jaishankar's word was not a passing moment. It was part of a new era, a multipolar world. In this order, no single country dictates terms. Authority is shared, negotiated, and contested across many tables. India's role is no longer limited to its region. It is global. And that unsettles the powers used to command without question. When Jaishankar spoke, it wasn't only India's voice that was heard. It was the collective voice of the global South. Countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America recognized the message sovereignty is not a privilege granted. It is a right to be claimed. And so, with one word, just one, Jaishankar didn't simply address diplomats or cameras. He addressed history itself. He reminded the world that true power is not measured by volume, but by conviction. That moment wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity. It was India stepping forward, shedding hesitation, and leading with confidence. The world noticed. America felt the tremor. And history recorded the echo. Because sometimes one word is enough to break illusions and shift the weight of global power. One word can remind nations that narratives are not inherited. They are written. Thank you for walking through this moment of courage, conviction, and clarity. May your own words carry truth. May they carry purpose. And may they always leave an echo. Stay strong, stay bold, and never forget. The future can be rewritten with a single word.